So hi there and welcome back to my channel. This is a short video about a new item I just made now, and well, I made mostly for my purposes because I found quite often, in model kits about the vintage car that I like so much, vintage car, because they have this pattern over, you see, this pattern, and it it can happen, sometimes in models like, for example, I was watching recently a picture posted by a very, very skilled American modeler, Jim Drew from Michigan. And he had a problem, an issue with the McLaren M8. Yes, the M8 Can-Am made by Accurate Miniature. The kit is a wonderful kit. Everybody of us I think everybody liking this type of cars collected that kit, but I remember that inside that kit there was a very, very a huge presence of soft rubber items, like the wirings and of course like the wheels. The wheels is a critical point because those cars had now I go in a little in a little minefield for me because I don't know the technical names in English about the parts of the tire, but this side was typical in the car of the 60s to be quite much more bulged compared to the modern car. The modern car for performance reasons, they became ultra thin. If you take, for example, the wheels that you can find inside models provided by Tamiya, like the Alpha 155 DTM car, they are extremely thin, as well as the nearly all the Porsches of the 90s and so on. They had very, very thin and ultra low. We call this side the spalla. The spalla means the shoulder, of the tire. I don't know the English name of this part of the tire, but I think you understand what I mean. So this side became absolutely smaller in modern cars. It's just recently that for regulation and so on, if you look at the tire, at the slick tire used by the Honda NSX or the recent Porsche's GT3R, they returned to have a quite larger part of this. I think it's because of regulation and also because the rims are usually, for example, for the WTCC car, there was a standard measure of 17 each, so they cannot go in bigger size like 19 or 20 and so on. And if you look also at the Le Mans car, this part of the tire, it's also the part where you can usually find the sponsor and so on, Michelin or whatever, Goodyear, and it returned to be in the last few years quite large. So the point was that in that models that all we have, as well as I made this production mostly in the beginning for my purposes because I like so many cars from the 60s, and in the 60s they had this huge rubber tire, and I think that this was the size because I don't know which was the model that I took it from. It was given to me by a friend that told me, listen, this is a Model Factory Hero part. If you modify a little them and you cast them in solid resin, this is not rubber, this is solid resin, and it's meant because the rubber that is the soft rubber that is provided inside the kit tend to be broken after some years. And when Jim made this post on his Facebook account, he also get a lot of comments under, including mine, and I was telling him I have the same issues, also not only with Accurate Miniature, but this happens nearly always with the Italeri rubber, mostly the older one, the older models, and especially also with the Revel kits. That's why for the trucks, I think you can have it here. As many of you well know, I also produce trucks conversion in 1/24 scale, and the problem was that the rubber tire, in the beginning I used it to cast in resin the rubber tire from Revel, the box used in the Busick, because it was the first one that I mounted, and in rubber they had problems with the consistency of the wheel, and it used to leak oil. So I prefer to make them in a solid resin. This is not model meant to be used or racing. They are not meant to be slot cars, and the slot have a kind of formula for the wheels, for the tires, that is similar to the real car, because they have to be extremely performance for the competition they do. But in our purpose of the static modeling, there is no needing for such to be in soft rubber. So I prefer to work on the details of these models, you know. And so I made these wheels in a solid resin that can be adapted to nearly all the models of the car of the 60s. You know, this is of course one of their standard measures, because many of these cars are different sizes. You know, I was just checking at the measure used by the Porsche 917. That is a subject that I love so much. But if you start from the earlier 917 of 69, arriving to the latest 917 of the 80s and so on, the wheel became huge, became much bigger, you know. I think so. This is a standard tire of 15 inch diameter, you know. That can be anyway also worked with a little Dremel like this, with that kind of and you can also adjust it to become to host maybe 16-inch rims, or working a little with plastic around the rim. When you get the plastic rim from your model, you can also make it fit maybe a smaller size like a 15, or at also maybe working very, very good with plastic around the border. But once again, sorry, because I don't know the names in English about this part, but I hope that you understand what I mean. And you can also make it fit, I think, unless a 13 inch. So there is a lot of range that you can do. Also, the width of the wheel is meant to be a width between the front inch in the 917 was starting from a 9 inch, arriving to the rear end of, I think it was a 15. The width, you know, of the tire, you know. I'm so sorry, because when I hear myself in English, I say, oh my Jesus, what I'm saying. But I really, really hope that you understand what I mean. So the idea is this: I made this set, you know. There is still some wheels in progress, because I told that I made this in the beginning for my own purposes, so I wanted to have some spare part, because my McLaren M8, I don't want it to end as the Jim one. He made a wonderful, stunning model. He's one of the best in America making cars, you know, and he had this ugly problem on the wheels of the car. And if you don't have the possibility to change them, or if you didn't copy them in the beginning, they were slightly different from the 917 ones, but I think you can adapt them. At least you can have a complete wheels instead of keeping a wonderful model with the damaged wheel. And we are all modelers, you know, and I know you guys. Every time that we make a model and we know that there is a problem or a mistake, our eyes constantly end over the mistake. So that is absolutely ugly for us to see our model in such conditions. So this was my idea to make them. I have a limited production of this limited stuff, of course. It is I made the molding, and I made some copies of them, and I think, yes, some of this set I will try to sell it if somebody needs them. So just drop me a mail at my info@marcalsoldatino.com. That is my email, or contact me via Facebook, maybe in the comment under here in YouTube. So for me it's the same, and I will try to help you out about to solve this issue with this problem that we all have, you know. Unfortunately, the rubber is something that used to get old with the time, and our models is probably stuff that I talk about myself. For example, there is some models that they were produced in the 80s that I bought in the 90s. They have been on the stash for nearly 20 years, and maybe I get the volunteer to build them up, and when I opened this model and I found the tires completely destroyed, it's really disappointing, because in some models, like indeed, for example, the McLaren Can-Am, it's extremely hard to find the models today. You know, they make Accurate Miniatures made that wonderful kits about the Corvette they made, and the McLaren they did, and they were amazing models, you know. But today they are incredibly rare and very, very pricey. And I don't think that even if you pay big money for a kit of the Accurate Miniature one, you will have fresh tire inside. I mean, the seller probably is as we used to say, in good faith, is believing to be good, because you probably never opened the kit, but it's the rubber inside that is honestly leaking. I don't dare neither to tell you that is a problem about the firma, because, for example, I had an issue with the BBR kit. It was the kit about the 333 SP, the Daytona winner car in 124 that I'm preparing my full kit, slightly modified to host the engine and so on. But also that kit, I remember, that was produced by BBR in Italy. BBR is a quite famous Italian company making extremely quality stuff, you know. And back in the day, they used to produce also racing kit in 124 scale. And I had one of these. This was this 333 SP, and I remember that since I built up the model, constantly the four wheels were leaking oil, but exactly the oil that you use to fry chips, to fry fish, and it was disappointing because every time it leaks this ugly stuff, nearly stink, was extremely ugly to see that. And it happened to me when the model was also complete, so painted, weathered, and with decals over. It was impossible to fix the issue, because the wheels was a special wheel, so you had to take from other kits, you had to scrap a Tamiya kit. The only company that had wheels lasting a little more, but not in all the kits, because it constantly, I think it also depends from the ambiental condition where you keep your models. Many of us, also for spaces and so on, don't keep the model inside your apartment, but you keep them in the garage, you keep them in other places, in other rooms outside your house, maybe sensitive to temperatures. So it's not absolutely easy to guarantee a constant temperature. And so the part that used to suffer much more are, as you well know, the rubber parts and the decal sheet. For the decal sheet, you can fix the problem, simply place the decal inside a plastic bag sealed. So with that, you already avoid all the humidity problems and so on over the decal sheets and so on. Sometimes also they are quite tricky, but it's much more easy to find a newest decal or somebody that can make a scan of the older decal and make a new drawing for you if you don't want to make another version, changing decal with the accessories that you can find on the market about them, But about the wheels is quite more complicated because it anyway requires a mold made in resin. And for example, I wanted to show you one. The only mark that you have on my wheels, it is, I try to keep the pattern that the cars from the 60s and the 70s had over, but you can also make it become slick, simply sanding them out. This is ordinary resin, you see. I just cleaned a little the part inside. This is the inner part where, of course, the detail is a little less nicer and a little less cleaner than the outer part. This is the outer part where you can apply your decal and you can paint it and so on. And there is just a little of course, extraction mark that usually it is meant to be on this position, so you can see. Also, if you make Can-Am cars or the cars that are open wheel cars and so on, you will just see the pattern of the wheel and probably not the mark. There is some, of course, this is anyway a resin production with a little bulge and so on, with little bubbles and holes, but if you mount them in the position when they are hidden, I think you can have anyway a decent condition to save your older model or the model that may have this issue about the rubber tires. So that's it. I hope you like this idea that I had. For me, this was very, very interesting. And yes, some of them are currently for sale. So just drop me a mail if you are interested in this. Thanks a lot and see you in the next.